we were discussing how if someone, does have, say, a tabloidish story, or if there is, some misinformation that someone seeks to spread, how easily it can be spread in this digital age of digital media and social media. Carry on with your thought there.
Yeah, so the underlying problem hasn't changed over the history of the news media, but certainly the volume of what can be distributed that might be fake or might be considered disinformation or misinformation has increased greatly. And as you said, the Trump era, and even in the last year with respect to COVID, you've been hearing a lot more about fake news. And I think it's important to when someone makes a claim of fake news, you got to stop and say, well, what do you mean? Do you mean this thing that you're talking about never actually happened at all? Or do you just mean that you disagree with the underlying premise, or that you have a different take on the issue? And I think that's what we need to get at. If we want to make any progress at all on fake news, I think we have to get our definitions down, and we have to come to some agreement on what we want the news media to do.
So one question that I've always wrestled with is when we're talking about censorship, because you're right, especially during the time of COVID, and many of us have seen this when somebody, a friend perhaps on, say, I'll use Facebook. I keep using Facebook as an example, but so many people are on that platform. Someone will post
Sure.
a news story or some kind of post or video on some aspect of COVID, perhaps they dispute the numbers that are being reported. Let's give that example. And then all of a sudden, Facebook will have this kind of the censorship that says, we dispute what is being said in the story. And if you want to see it, click ahead. But just a warning, we think this is false and spreading misinformation. And so I remember sometimes I would think about that. I say, well, who gets to determine what is fake news? Who gets to determine who's the arbiter of that? Maybe in Canada, we'll stick to just Canada, but who gets to determine that?
Well, as you said, I mean, Facebook has to decide what goes on its platform, and so it becomes the de facto arbiter of information for anybody who's getting, scrolling through there and wanting to learn from that. So, I mean, that's clearly a problem. My article focused more on the sort of the legacy media, the newspapers and TV. And what they're doing on the fake news front. And certainly there's been lots of action. The federal government has been funding anti-fake news programs, and and sometimes even arguments about hate speech get rolled into this sort of omnibus fake news argument. So it can kind of metastasize into whatever people want to be talking about. Fake news is this kind of convenient handle to hang on things.
So does Canada have a fake news problem, a problem with misinformation with the mainstream media? We'll stick to traditional media then. Do we have a problem with this?
I mean, in terms of, if we take the narrow definition of fake news, which is reporting on things that are not true, never happened, Bigfoot baby kind of stories, I don't think we really do. I think most people are smart enough to be able to figure out, that the Queen Elizabeth isn't a reptile, and all these other kind of crazy conspiracy things, that Elvis isn't alive, et cetera, et cetera. I think where you get more into the weeds is when we start talking about heavily biased media. And certainly we've had a proliferation of that. And in many times the bias becomes sort of the accepted narrative, and anyone who wants to question, conventional wisdom becomes alleged purveyor of fake news. And I think that's a problem. And the sort of the legacy media program I was talking about in the news article for C2C about this, how to spot fake news, sort of took it apart a little bit, and most of these, most of their little tools on how to spot fake news were really just sort of messaging that says that legacy newspapers are the only credible source of news, and upstart TV stations and social media organizations and anything sort of online are to be viewed with suspicion. And so I think that's a big problem, I think.